Guys. So I'm going to be talking to you all today about kind of a different single story in Italy. So reading through y'all's responses, I would say probably the most associated idea we have with Italy is the food. And that's for a good reason. The food there is amazing. But maybe a couple spots down from pizza and pasta, there's also a very commonly associated idea of the mafia within Italy. And so, while the mafia does exist in Italy, so that's not its existence isn't really the single story, but we don't see the complete story of see this and how the mafia is represented. I would say, as Americans and other foreigners, there's a through media representation, and also a little bit of the glorified view of the mafia. It's seen as, yes, somewhat dangerous, but kind of this cool, strong, and powerful group that has control over a lot of the Italian population. So first, I'm going to kind of talk about the origins of the mafia to give you all a little bit of history, to give you kind of more of the full story. And this is going to the history kind of explains where this, a little bit of a positive vibe around the mafia comes from. So the mafia, which is actually called, in Italian, it's called Cosa Nostra, which means our thing. It was founded in southern Italy, actually in Sicily, which is an island off the coast. Cosa Nostra was founded around the early 1800s. And interestingly enough, around that time when it was founded, it was somewhat of a supported group. And this is because during this time, for one, the majority of Italians were extremely poor, especially in southern. And at the same time, the government during that time was extremely weak, and so they weren't doing very much, or the Italian people felt that the government wasn't doing much to and more specifically to protect them from the wealthy landowners. So kind of in America, we have pretty rigid property laws, right? You know, where your parents own the property that your house or apartment is on, and you have rights to that property. In Italy at this time, that wasn't exactly a thing. And so people with more power and more wealth could come in and just kind of take land from these poorer people. And again, this was the only way they had to support themselves. And so if their land was taken away, they were really left with nothing. And so again, due to the fact that the government wasn't doing much, in the early 1800s, a group of Italians in Sicily decided to kind of take matters into their own hands. And so this was a group of men, and their kind of outlook was to start protecting the majority of the people, protect these farmers from the wealthy, and try and play a role that the government, in their opinion, wasn't playing. So weren't always legal. The mafia in its origins really did kind of have this positive outlook on it. In fact, they were compared to Robin Hood, helping the poor. Aspect to the mafia, but to give more of the full story, it's important to note that over the years, the mafia went through transformation. By the later 1800s, the government started becoming more powerful, and played a bigger role. They started taking more action. And the mafia kind of turned from this idea of protection of the poor to just being more selfish and wanting to put money in their own pockets through illegal practices. on the more modern side of the story is the media representation, and also, in a sense, the lack of representation of the mafia that gives us the idea that we see today. So for one, and I don't know how many of these movies you all have seen, but movies like The Godfather, even if you all have seen Zootopia, there's a mafia reference in there. And these, as I was kind of saying earlier, these movies give the mafia this really kind of cool, powerful image. Outside of that, as far as lack of representation, you don't, especially obviously in the American media, but even in the Italian media, it's not a common subject. I have lived in Italy times with Italians about the mafia, and it was very short. They made it very clear that they hoped that the government continued to fight, and that the mafia became less powerful, and that it was not a positive aspect of their country. And so all these things kind of together make it seem as if the Italian population supports, or at least doesn't have very strong feelings about the mafia. And I believe this is an important single story to dispel, because that's not the full story. The Italian population does a lot to counter the mafia. For example, I'll show you all this picture. It's the Pizzo campaign. Pizzo is the protection money that a family will pay the mafia in order for them to be protected. And so the No Pizzo campaign is the Italian, this is all concentrated in southern Italy, where the mafia has a stronger presence. The No Pizzo campaign is, the Italian population started this, and the pizzo, they're not associated with the mafia. And the everyday Italian takes this very seriously. They're going to go to these stores and restaurants and hotels that advertise that they're not connected, because they want to support people. And there's a long list that Italians have made of places that are associated with the mafia. And Italians, the majority of Southern Italians, will do their best to stay away from these places, because, again, they don't want to support an organization that they really don't see as a positive thing. So I just think in general it's an interesting that as Americans, as people who, when we don't really have the full story, we have this kind of glorified view, again, of the mafia. But Italians take it very seriously, and it's nothing to be glorified, and not really hardly anything positive about it in the Italian population. It's kind of my single story. Now we are going to kind of check what you all know and do a myths versus facts activity. So, put the myths versus facts up here. And you all, I don't know if someone wants to come up and say it, or kind of as a class, say whether it is a myth or a fact. Okay, number you could do thumbs up and thumbs down. It's easier than speaking. As Annie talked about. Okay, number 2, Italians today fully support the mafia and believe they do good for the country. Myth or fact? Also a myth. Good. Okay, Spaniards work shorter average than most other people in Europe. Myth or fact? Good. And number 4, when the mafia was first formed, it was compared to Robin Hood because their goal was to protect the poor. All right, good job. And last one, siesta is becoming less and less common in Spain. Awesome, another fact. All right. Now.
Yeah, so we have a little bit of time, so I guess maybe, do we want to do questions? Like if anyone had questions for us? Yeah. Hungary and Ghana? Oh, so they're going to be doing a lesson in the afternoon, and they're the ones that have been to Hungary and Ghana, so they're going to talk about those countries in the afternoon.
Kind of pecking away on their notes, but I don't think we have any more questions.
All right, awesome. Well, hopefully you guys learned some things, maybe sort of had changed a little bit about some single stories you may have had, but just I think the biggest